Hello everyone, welcome back to Girl Plus Garden. And if you're new here, my name is Jordan and today I'm going to be sharing with you all my 2026 garden plan. We are going to go through the plans for late winter and spring, late spring and summer, and also the fall. So I hope you are looking forward to the information I'm going to share here, and let's get into it. Okay, so a couple of disclaimers before we get into what exactly my plans are for the growing seasons here in 2026. I am in the middle of a complete garden overhaul and reconstruction, essentially. If you watched my first video, you may have saw me or heard me mention that in the first video, but I currently only have about 3 beds, and I say 3 beds because 2 of them are filled with the growing medium that I use and have been using pretty much since I've started gardening. One of them has not been filled yet. It is built, but it has not been filled. But I essentially have about 7 more garden beds to build, and a few more in-ground spaces that I need to prep and get ready for once the warm season comes along, because I know I'll be using especially those in-ground spaces for the warm season specifically. So yeah, that's disclaimer number 1. Number 2, I am very type A. So please don't take this video as something that you necessarily have to do in your own gardening journey, whether you're new or you're experienced in gardening. This is what I found to be helpful for me since the beginning. Like I said, because I am type A, I tend to be more on the organized side. I'm not completely organized all the time, but I tend to lean more towards organization and prep and being prepared and kind of having all of those things in motion and ready to go before I take action or do something. So again, this is not something you absolutely have to do as a gardener. This is just something that I find helpful when I am planning out what I would like to do for my gardening seasons, and also thought it would be nice to share, especially for anybody who's new to gardening, to give some insight into what that looks like for me, and possibly inspire you if that's something that you're interested in doing and implementing this into your own gardening and growing practices yourself. So yeah, I will show you guys in just a second my drawn out garden plan. And tell me in the comments if that is something you'd like to see me actually drawing my garden out on paper. I have this grid line notebook that I've had for several years, and it's something that I've used since my first garden to kind of draw out and plan my garden. So hopefully I can put this up and show you guys a pretty good picture. Hopefully you can see. Obviously, you don't need to see all of the details on this page, but essentially what this is my plan. So once, like I said, once I'm completely done constructing everything for this rebuild, that is essentially what the garden layout should look like. And the way I like to use this is to help me kind of plan where I'm going to plant my crops. Now, for me, once the summer season hits, once we get into like May and June especially, the whole garden is pretty much going to be full sun, at least for a majority of the day or the daylight hours. So that is something you definitely want to take into consideration when you're creating any sort of garden plan, is where your sunlight, full sun, and shady spots kind of sit throughout your garden. At the very least, even if you're not going to like draw out a full elaborate garden plan, you want to take something like that into consideration so that you know the most optimal areas to plant certain plants, because you have plants who are going to benefit from part shade and you have plants that are going to thrive in the full sun. So I want to just make note of that, because like I said, once the warm season gets here, for me in particular, and the way my garden layout is already, or at least the area I have allotted for my garden, it's gonna be completely full sun. In the early spring and the fall garden seasons, I do tend to get more shady spots. So again, something to consider when you're creating a garden plan is kind of what that is going to look like, where your sun hours are going to be, and if that's going to differ in particular beds or spots in your garden, so that you know the best way to plan out where, at least have a general idea of where you're going to put certain plants within your garden. So that is my layout. Like I said, right now I only have, so it would really be these 3 beds right here. These 3 beds have been built. The first 2 are actually full of soil, ready to go. I kind of have my plans for that already in set, and I'm only going to be using those 2 to 3 beds for the cold weather crops I started in the previous video, and I've already allotted my spaces and all that sorts of stuff. So let me get into exactly what I'm going to be growing for the late winter, early spring garden. We have lots of kales. I have 5 different kale varieties, which is going to be Scarlet kale, curly kale, premier kale, red Russian kale, and Dino kale. We also have a few other brassicas that I'm going to be growing. So I have 2 varieties of broccoli. I have 2 varieties of cabbage, and I also have some collard greens. I did not start my collard greens in the last video because I didn't have those seeds, but I went and purchased some recently and went ahead and just plopped those into my seed starting plugs so that they can kind of have a head start. My goal is to get the plants that I've started indoors transplanted out into the garden, or in the garden beds outside, by about mid-February, end of February at the very, very latest. I also am going to be direct sowing some things, hopefully today. We have a bit of a warm week this week here where I am. So today I'm planning to go out and sow some carrot seeds. I'll be sowing some beet seeds as well. I'll also be sowing some rutabaga seeds, and probably my lettuce seeds as well. Those are all seeds that I tend to only direct sow. I am still considering starting a couple of lettuce plugs just to see how that fares for me in my area and for my process. But usually I tend to just sow those directly into the soil and let them start and grow wherever they land. So yeah, that is my plan, and I will put on the screen the different varieties of the beets and carrots and lettuces that I will be sowing directly into the garden. I also should hopefully be able to get into the ground some snow peas. So the reason I said hopefully is because snow peas are going to do best on a trellis, and I really don't have any sort of trellising system set up in either of the beds that I have already prepped and ready to go yet. So that's kind of on the fence as of right now. I still have to determine what's going to be most ideal for my circumstances currently. But I'm hoping definitely to get some snow peas planted because I do really enjoy growing those and getting to eat those as well. I did forget to mention my chard. So chard was another thing I started in my previous video for my 2026 winter crops. So chard, I have rainbow chard, red chard, and perpetual spinach, which is just your basic, pretty much like a basic green chard. But yes, I do have those as well. And also I will also be direct sowing some nasturtiums and some snapdragons, which are both cold hardy, at least to a certain degree, flowers that I would like to have in the cooler season. Nasturtiums I probably won't sow into the ground until about March-ish, early to mid-March, because they're not as frost tolerant as something like a snapdragon. But I will probably go ahead and sow my snapdragons with the rest of the seeds I plan to sow this week that are going directly into the garden beds. So that wraps up my plans for the late winter, early spring 2026. Now we're gonna get into my garden plans for the summer, late spring and summer. So this is the season where all of our warm crops are going to come into play. Tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, squash, eggplants, all those things, and a few new things that I plan to try growing this year as well. So this one I'm going to be a bit more detailed with and letting you guys know what exactly I'm growing, because I have a lot more experience with the warm season crops than I do with the cool weather crops. So let's jump straight into it. So starting with tomatoes, I'm gonna look down here at my notebook so I can tell you exactly what I'm growing. I've broken my tomatoes down into 3 different subcategories. So we have our slicer tomatoes, think tomatoes that you can put on a sandwich. So we have the slicers, we have our paste tomatoes. Paste tomatoes are generally used for making sauces and for canning. So paste tomatoes is my second category, and then cherry tomatoes, snacking tomatoes, salad tomatoes. Those are typically what I use the cherry tomatoes for. So those are the 3 categories that we have for our tomatoes. Now, for our slicer category, we are going to be growing for this 2026 year pink Berkeley tie-dye, Brandywine, Paul Robeson, Dr. Wyche's, Granny Cantrell's German Red, Old German, and I have, I believe, 1 or 2 more spaces for a couple more slicer varieties. And I know I would really like to grow the Terracotta tomato. It's a tomato I've grown before. I haven't grown it in a bit, in a couple years, I believe. So I'd really like to throw that in if I can, and still kind of debating on the last spot for my slicing tomatoes. So planning to grow about 8-ish different varieties this year, and hopefully that will fare well. As far as my paste tomatoes, I am definitely going to be doing San Marzano. That is pretty much a classic paste tomato. I also will have red Oxheart. It's one that I've grown before that I've really enjoyed. They get really big and they're very meaty. So that's my second one. And then purple Russian. This is kind of gonna be more of a fun plum / paste tomato that I'm gonna be growing. I grew it, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and it was really good. It is obviously a purple / black tomato, so it tends to have a bit of a different flavor profile compared to your typical classic red tomatoes. So I'm really looking forward to adding that in. Though I only have 3 varieties for my plum and paste tomatoes, I will be growing multiple plants of these varieties. I may add in 1 additional variety. I've been scouting out a couple of different varieties to add into this category, but that's still up in the air, and I still have a little bit of time to decide before I begin these plants or seed starts inside. So next category, still under tomatoes, is going to be our cherry tomatoes. And for this year, I am planning to grow 3, possibly 4. Now, I tend to do this with adding on more tomatoes than I tell myself I should, or more plants in general, not just tomatoes, but plants in general than I tell myself I should. So the 3 I'm definitely going to be growing for my cherry varieties are going to be Gardener's Delight, Isis Candy, and Sungold. I've grown all 3 of these before. I enjoy all of these 3 probably the most out of all of the cherry tomato varieties that I actually have. The one I would like to add that kind of fits into this cherry tomato category is Lucky Tiger. I attempted to grow it last year. I did have a very small amount of plants growing last year, and I attempted to grow it last year, but I think my seedling got confused or mixed up with the rest of the varieties that I started, and I believe it got trashed because I thought it was a duplicate of a variety that I already had a nice full plant of and transplant it into my garden. So Lucky Tiger I would like to throw in as a fourth variety for the cherry tomato. So fingers crossed I do what I need to do and I'm able to get these beds built and filled by the time the warm season comes around and those plants are ready to go outside. Okay, my next category of plants for the warm season is going to be peppers. So just focusing on your staples for bell peppers, or my staples rather, for bell peppers and then for hot peppers. So reds, greens, obviously all peppers start green, so that doesn't really count, but reds, yellows, and oranges are gonna be my main bell peppers or sweet peppers that I'm growing this year. And for hot peppers, I plan on doing jalapeno, just your classic jalapeno, and a serrano pepper. I do have one more actually category for my peppers, which is gonna be snacking peppers. I've grown shishito peppers since I've started the garden, or since I had my first gardening year, and I've loved them ever since. So that is like a must grow every year for me. So I will have some shishito pepper plants outside this year. And I would also really like to grow the KABBAGE pepper plant as well. I've grown it once and I got a handful of peppers off of the plant in the year that I grew it. So I'd really like to be more intentional about growing successfully the KABBAGE pepper plant this year and actually getting hopefully a decent harvest off of it. It's a really good snacking pepper, something you could add on to like a veggie platter, and they're really beautiful in my personal opinion. So yeah, those are the snacking peppers. As far as specific varieties for my bell peppers, I'm going to be growing Marconi Red, Cali Wonder. I plan to do the yellow variety and the orange variety. And then I will also do an additional yellow variety, and that's going to be Yellow Monster. And I'll put pictures up of these varieties on the screen as well, so that way you guys can take a look at them and get an idea of what they should look like when it's time to harvest them. Next category we have for the warm season is going to be eggplants. So I have two different varieties of eggplants that I plan to have for this year's warm season. That's going to be Black Beauty and Ping Tongue. Both varieties that I've grown before. I believe all of the varieties that I have here for all of my plants, with the exception of maybe a handful, are varieties of different plants that I've already had experience with growing and that I really enjoy. So that is what I've got planned for eggplants. For squash, so we have our summer squash and our winter squash. Keeping it simple with the winter squash this year, I probably will only do 2. I have 3 on my list, but I need to decide between the second 2. I'm definitely going to be growing butternut squash, 100%, no doubt about it. I always enjoy whenever I'm able to harvest butternut squash out of the garden, so that is a must grow for me. For the second one, I'm between kabocha squash and red curry. Kabocha squash I've grown before, red curry I have not. So I'm really debating between growing something I'm familiar with and starting something new. Possibly leaning towards starting something new, since the majority of the rest of my plants are going to be varieties I have experience growing and harvesting and eating. So, but still undecided, and I'll make my decision as we get closer to the warm season. As far as summer squash goes, so zucchinis and other summer varieties, I've got the Costata Romanesco zucchini. We've got a yellow, classic yellow straight squash. We have the gray zucchini, and I will be either doing the yellow patty pan squash or the lemon squash. Yellow patty pan is kind of that funky shaped squash that you might see, and the lemon squash is kind of just like it says. It pretty much looks like the shape and size of a lemon, and it's yellow. So that's what I have for the summer varieties of my squash. Going into cucumbers, we have straight 8 cucumber, we have Boston pickling cucumber. I will be growing as well the White Wonder, the Bait Alpha, I believe I said that correct, and this one I know I'm going to mess up a bit. It's the Jabai Shima. I'm just gonna put it up on the screen. I've grown it before. It's an Asian type or style cucumber or Asian variety. And that's one that I really love. And it's probably going to be on my must grow list for the foreseeable future. So those are my cucumbers. Green beans. So I will most likely grow mostly pole type green beans for this year in particular. If everything goes as planned, I will do a succession sowing of green beans that will be bush types. So as far as my pole types, I will definitely be doing the Louisiana purple. I will be doing Grandma Nellie's mushroom, yellow mushroom, and the rattlesnake. There's one more I would like to decide on for the pole types. I want to find a nice, if I can, stringless and tender, just straight green pole variety. And I will decide on that once we get closer to the warm growing season. I have an idea of what I would like to do with my bush varieties if I am able to do that succession planting with the bush types, but I have not exactly decided on the varieties I will be planting for that particular sowing. So I will decide on that a little bit later, but that's what we have for our green beans or bean category. Okra is another plant I will be growing this year. It's one of those must-grow plants for me. Clemson Spineless in particular is a variety that I grow every single year. The other varieties I plan to add on to my okra grow list for 2026 are going to be Burgundy. We also have Beck's Big Buck. That's a short, stout okra that I really enjoy. And then I believe I have one more. I believe it's a African variety. I don't have it listed in front of me right now, but I'll put a picture of it up on the screen so that way you guys can take a look at it. But yeah, that is my plans for the okra varieties for this year. Something that is going to be new for me this year, hopefully, if everything works out with this reconstruction, is going to be growing potatoes. So I have yet in my 6 years of gardening to grow any sort of potato. So ideally, and in a perfect world, I will be growing both regular, your classic yellow and white and red potatoes, and I will also be growing sweet potatoes. Now, if I'm able to do both, I will most likely grow my sweet potatoes in one of my raised beds, and then I will grow the other potatoes, your regular potatoes, into the ground. So into one of the rows I will have allotted in my small in-ground space that I plan to prep before the warm growing season. So that again is going to be brand new for me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works. One thing in particular that I'm plan to test with the in-ground potatoes specifically, I might leave that in because that was just so funny. One thing that I plan to test with the in-ground potatoes specifically is overwintering them in the ground. So the area that we live in, we don't have basements here, and it's really, it's not so cost effective if you don't have the funds at your disposal to implement or try to install any sort of root cellar, or maybe like an alternative to that. So I would like to see, if possible, if I can overwinter those potatoes in ground and use the earth kind of as my storage system for the potatoes that I'm able to grow in the ground. And most likely, if it works out, just dig them out. So dig the potatoes out as I find a need for them when they're ready to be used. So hopefully that works out. I've seen a couple of other gardeners do that and have done a little bit of research on that. So I'm hoping that works out in my favor for this year so that I can grow them and hopefully also store them successfully. One of the last things I plan on adding just as an additional attraction in the garden is going to be just some annual flowers. It's something I tend to do every year, is just add some beautiful annuals into the garden to attract the pollinators and give them a source of food, and also bring them into the garden to assist with the other plants that are going to need their help through the growing seasons. So zinnias and sunflowers are almost always on my growing list. I have a few other annuals that I'm eyeing and possibly looking to add for this year, but for 100% fact, I will definitely be doing zinnias and sunflowers. Last one I did forget is going to be watermelons. I want to grow 2 varieties. I am deciding between 3. I put 4 up, but I meant 3. What I 100% will be growing yellow moon and stars. I don't know that there will ever be a year that I grow watermelons and I don't grow yellow moon and stars. That is probably going to be my favorite until I find another one that I like, at least for yellow type, yellow variety watermelons. I would also like to grow a red one. I am between the Charleston Gray, which is a variety I've grown before, and the Congo watermelon, which I have not grown before. I'm leaning towards the Congo watermelon, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say that it's going to be yellow moon and stars and the Congo watermelon for my watermelon growing this year. If that should change, of course, I'll update you guys. I only plan to have 3 to 4 watermelon plants this year, as I just simply don't want to overdo it. Watermelons grow out so much and they can kind of take over a space. So I don't want to overdo it, but I definitely want to get to indulge in some watermelons in this warm growing season for 2026. So that is all of the summer varieties and plants I plan to grow for this year. I will also be peppering in lots of different basil plants and marigolds for some companion planting, especially for my nightshades. So peppers, eggplants, tomatoes. I will definitely be adding some of those just around those plants to assist with warding off those pests, and also to add some more beauty and freshness to the garden. I love basil and getting to make pesto in the warm growing season as well. So I will be adding those in for the warm season specifically. That is what we have for the warm season for this year. The fall season for this year is pretty much going to look exactly like the early spring, the late winter / early spring growing season for this year, with the exception of hopefully getting to do a succession growing, or sowing rather, of those bush beans that I was talking about earlier, and then also adding in a nice big sowing of some collard greens. So we really use up collard greens in our holiday cooking. So I would really, really, really like to be able to grow all of the collard greens that we're going to need and use for our Thanksgiving and our Christmas meals. Those are staples for us. So I'm hoping that I will be able to provide what we are going to need for the holiday feasting season for this year. So everything else is going to be the same, just adding those additional things into the cold season once it comes back around at the end of 2026. So yeah, I hope that was helpful and gives you at least a little bit of insight into kind of how my process is for planning the garden, and also a look into exactly what I am planning on and am super excited about growing this year. I always enjoy the garden and getting to harvest and reap the fruits of my labor. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that works out for us this year. And I also look forward to updating you guys on how everything goes. So I hope you'll continue to follow along, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.